Easy, how are we?
Sean E, what's happening?
Do you know what? It's taken me a lot of research and a lot of time, but I realized that your approach to the marathon is very similar to Ilya Kipchoge's. And that
There's a
is what this
comparison I never
podcast
thought
is
of
going to
that.
be
But go
about.
on.
Because this podcast will not concern you or Kipchoge. Because seemingly, allegedly, from what I read today, especially when he did his world record marathon in 2017, anyway, Kipchoge doesn't do any tapering. And I'm willing to bet you're not going to taper either leading to the Dublin City Marathon in 2 weeks' time because you've only trained for 5 weeks in total leading up to it.
No, I will not. I don't know. Call me. Well, I thought I was a bit of a lunatic until I heard the world record holder is my inspiration now, and I'm just following his lead. Now everyone's going to think it's a great idea. But up until 5 minutes ago, I was going to say, well, I have this stupid idea that my longest run in my training program is just going to be a marathon. So yeah, it's I'm going to train this week the same as I have been. It'll be 45-minute runs at varied intensities. Come the weekend, the cycling, I'm gonna get on the bike as well. So there'll be 30 minutes at least cycling in the mornings, and then the running's gonna happen that night or that afternoon as well, just to try and I want to take the pressure off the knees, but I want to keep the cardio kind of working. The heart is good. It's the knees that are kind of struggling. They struggled probably through 25k. I had to. It was a funny one. I know I said it to you. I had to speed up to stop the pain, which is very strange.
That's just running gait and change and stuff like that. Just for people listening, you did a 30k on Saturday with Aussie, and you were at what was a 540 pace. You had to pick it up to a 520, and you actually felt better at a 520 as if the probably just your the way you're running your gait was different, but you'd probably have to run close to a 540 on the marathon, which would give you a 4 hour pace. Am I right in saying that, or do you know what you're doing for the marathon?
Yeah, well, it's the aim is 4:15.
Okay.
Under 4 is the secondary target. But the 4:15 is the realistic target. Because yes, I can do a half marathon very comfortably at a 5:40, but they say double it and add 15 minutes. So 4:15. If I can stick it out and do it under 4, that's a very good day. And if I'm feeling good with 12k to go, and I'm feeling a lot better than I did on Saturday, then who knows, I might knock off another couple of minutes off it. But to be honest, once you're through the half marathon at whatever pace you're going, you're not really going to make too much of a world of difference to the time. So I think getting around injury free is king. But yeah, so I'll keep the training, keep the cycling. I don't know if I'm going to run 30k again.
Right.
I think next weekend I'm probably going to do a 10 miler and a half marathon. I'm going to do it over 2 days. I don't think there's a need to go to that level again.
Okay.
I just think it could be too much a week out. But I think doing high volume over 2 days is a better approach.
And allowing your body to rest a little bit more in between.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I won't take a rest Monday. I'll get into some cycling and a light run Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, very light. Probably a 5k. And then Friday, Saturday, chill out. Is the aim, and maybe yeah. So I think my tapering is going to be 2 days. But yeah, that's the unfortunate circumstance I've been left with. But yeah, I've got 10 days. 10 days to get through it.
10 days to get through it. Well, people are probably listening going, well, you know, some people might even be saying, what's tapering? Or, hey, guys, like we're talking about tapering this week with 2 weeks to the marathon instead of last week when most people talk about marathons with 3 weeks. So in this podcast, we're going to break down tapering, what exactly tapering is, why some people do it with 3 weeks to go, why some people go with 2 weeks to go. We also have some comments from people from our Instagram page. We put it out Saturday after we both did our long 30k plus runs. We put it out having different people's opinion. And I was actually not that I was shocked, but I think a lot of people agreed with myself and yourself more so in the 2 week, even though technically by the letter of law, a 3 week tapering might be a little bit better. So we're going to get into that as soon as I hit the intro music for this week's episode of the Any Given Run Day podcast. Let's go. So I did a little bit of homework today on this one, Eric. I have notes for the episode. So I was looking
to see you doing a bit.
I know the change. All right. So I was doing my research and, just what the science says and what's better for a 3-week taper before a marathon, a 2-week taper before a marathon. But I suppose to bring it all right back, just to keep people like, what exactly is tapering? So the best definition I found on it is it's minimizing fatigue without compromising fitness. So it's how do you pull back enough that you feel better and fresh on race day without feeling like your fitness is going. And they say somewhere between 14 and 21 days is where your aerobic fitness starts to pull back on it. And it's that point where you kind of trust your program and trust your fitness and be like, okay, I'm at a good point without trying to push it too much and risk getting injured. So personally, I think, and just let's take you for an extreme case in this one. You now, obviously, we've talked for the podcast. You've done a lot of stuff leading up to now, like you've cycled the whole length of Ireland. But with 5 weeks to go, you're not going to stop with 2 weeks and go, you know what? I've hit my peak. I'm going to pull back. Your body, in theory, should be fresh enough to push that little bit more. But it also depends on how hard you recover. Like, if you've had a perfect 16-week marathon training program, and on that, the 13th week, you're like, everything has gone smooth. I just hit my long 30, 35K run, whatever it is, whatever you believe in for the longest run before a marathon or the 2.5 hour mark, whatever it is, I'm going to pull back now and have a strict taper then for the next thing. I will get into the meaning for that. That can make sense. But myself, for example, I didn't have a perfect 16-week plan. I ended up doing 80K and then I did a marathon in Galway the following week. But then I had 4 weeks from there. And if I knew I did nothing for 4 weeks or pulled back for 4 weeks, I wouldn't feel good for Dublin. And even I didn't do anything the week afterwards, and which was too long for not doing anything, because 8-9 days I went back out and I felt slow, I felt sluggish, I was easing into it. So I can imagine expanding that over 2-3 weeks and then going to Dublin without doing little to no training. So it's how do you pull back on the mileage without pulling back too much on the intensity? Would you agree with that, or is there anything you would disagree with that one compared to other marathons maybe you've done before in terms of what tapering you've done?
For me, the last time we did the out on the marathon for my 3:35, I actually picked up a bit of a niggle into the last 7 weeks. So I actually tapered for 7 weeks, where I was actually struggling to get out for the longer runs. And I really felt that through 35K, the hammies and stuff started to give in and other little things. I think, and this is no science, this is me listening to me. Mentally, I am weak if I haven't felt like I've been working for the day. Yes. So as in, if I'm taking 2 weeks off and then I'm just going to show up, I'm going to, and this is the thing, sorry, maybe I'm wrong to say taking 2 weeks off. You're not, you're just not running the same volume of mileage. And there is logic to that. Like if I was 3 weeks ago and I was comfortably down at a 4:30 pace through 25, 26K, okay, then this week the 45 minutes each night makes sense. The long run on the weekend makes sense at the pace that you're going to do it at, and that's what I would be. I think people, and previously myself, would have thought of tapering as nearly a holiday mode, where you're barely moving because you're trying to conserve energy, which is not the case. And I suppose that's probably one thing to clarify with the taper. You're tapering, but you're still moving. You're still doing an interval session in that week of taper. You're still, it's just not to the same volume. It's not to the same intensity, because you're hoping that by just stepping it back a little bit, you've given the body a chance to survive the 40K as well. But then for me, with 5 weeks, like, people were thinking about tapering, and I was putting on my shoes for the first time in Kildare Village for the next one. But it's a case of, for me, mentally, I need to push the body enough to know it can show up on the day. So
100%.
Again, I don't know, there's no science to it, but the mentality is, I ran the 30K. I knew I was under pressure. And when we were in the car park, I said to Ozzy, Jays, I was under a bit of pressure there now through 25K. I said, Denise, but I kind of held on to 30. I probably didn't have too much more in me, but I still have 2 weeks left. And that is a horrible statement to be making. I was like, I still have 2 weeks to make up 12K.
At the same time, though, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, mentally is a big thing as well. For one, just getting that routine of keep going, especially if you're a routine person, you run at certain times each time. But now that you're like, you can, if you're in the marathon and that niggle comes again, 25K, you can recollect, okay, 2 weeks ago when I was in the Phoenix Park with Ozzy, my knee was at me a little bit, and I was able to push through this in a training effect without the extra adrenaline that's coming onto you now doing a marathon. It can help you find a way. So if you're struggling with your training and you haven't got that longest run in, now maybe not do it the week before the marathon, but the 2 weeks I think is enough for most of us weekend warriors to go out there and go, you know what, I need that 35K just to have it as much in the legs as also mentally to be able to recollect on it, because there will be times where you struggle during a marathon. There'll be times where you might hit that wall and you feel like you can't do it. And if you've nothing to go back on, if you haven't hit those long runs, there's nothing you can take from and go, you know what, I've been here before, I can push through it and been there recently enough that it's like the body is able to do it. So when your body's like, oh, I can't do this, I can't do it, your mind can tell it to shut up. I've literally done it 2-3 weeks ago. I've gone to this dark place. I'll end up keep on going and pushing through. So I think you're 100% right when you say the mind plays a bigger battle in it than a lot of people think, in my opinion as well.
Yeah, no, it is a weird one, and to have that attitude, I still couldn't believe what I had said. It was like, I've 5 weeks to train for this. I've 3 weeks in, ran the 30K, was under pressure, and my attitude was, I still have 2 weeks left. Do you know, like, it's just like, so, like, what am I going to do in 2 weeks? But I'm going to add more miles, is exactly what I'm going to do. But I did make the decision that yoga has to happen every day. I didn't do any today. I just said, no, look, and yes, is yoga recovery, should I be stretching? I had the massage going on and stuff, but I just kind of let the body just be for the day, because even yoga's stressful.
100%.
But I am only going to survive if I dedicate 30 minutes to stretching every day. Single leg squats, just nice and easy, working on the balance, just triggering. I'm going to get the resistance bands, start doing glute activation stuff. I need to do stuff to help just keep everything in place. And one of the comments Ozzy made to me on the run as we came through 24K, and I was like, oh, knees are feeling bad. He was like, well, I was running behind you there, your hips are actually looking good, because everyone knows when I get tired, the hips are going side to side. I'm like a horse being walked down to the mart. But yeah, so in terms of everything else, cardiovascularly wasn't under pressure. I hadn't let go of everything else. It was just the pain. So I think I have to preemptively look after the body in that sense, in terms of stretching, flexibility, activation, stability. Just put all of those good key words into action. We say it all the time, we never really do it, but I think the only way I'm going to do it is by doing that religiously for the next 2 weeks, up until the day of the marathon.
Yeah, and you also talk about that, certainly go like intensity and stuff. That could still be there. Like you could still have, like you said, one interval session a week. There's nothing wrong with that if you've been doing that up to this point, as long as the overall mileage drops a little bit. So yeah, I mean, like as long as there's a bit of a breather there, the mileage drops a small bit week on week from 3 weeks down to, or 2 weeks down to marathon day. So you're not have as much stress on the body, but it's not like you said, like we used to think of tapering before. Oh, it's a holiday, I've got 3 weeks rest and that's it. You can get those quality training sessions in, pulling back a small bit of mileage, as long as you're not doing something that you haven't really done before, or you're doing intervals that you normally do to build you for a 5K or a 10K. Like personally, I'm not a fan of not a fan. I'm not great at doing the faster intervals. Like I was reading, have you heard about the Yasso 800s? So the Yasso 800s is an interesting theory, actually. So the Yasso 800s, it's a track, you run at 800 meters. So you loop it twice and you do 10 repeats of 800 meters. You rest for as long as you run. So let's say you did the 800 meter and you're averaging 4 minutes and you did that 8 times. You rest for 4 minutes, you'd run again, did it 10 times, sorry. Through that, they reckon that your time would be a 4-hour marathon.
Really?
Yeah. Now, I've never done this theory, so I'm not backing a yes and no, but there's some people online that are like, yeah, this actually works. So you narrow it right down. So let's say you did the 800 in meters and you did it in 250. To 2 minutes, 50 seconds. You did that 10 times. You rest at 250. In theory, your marathon pace is 2 hours, 50 minutes. Now, if you haven't done this before and you're doing a marathon, do not try and do this now beforehand, because you're going to push yourself that hard. You're going to get injured. But the idea is you start like the start of the year and you build up to, okay, let's say the goal is a 4-hour marathon. You might get 5 or 6 in at that time, as in lengths of time, and then you might tail off a bit and then keep going from there. Now, there's a lot to it, but it's one of those where you rack your head around it and afterwards it's the podcast, you'd be like, wait, no, that's very anaerobic. That wouldn't work. Or, you know, you might actually be like, actually, no, keep going. It would work. But it's just interesting that I found this, what I read, that some runners do that this time of year to get that one last kind of interval push is the Yasso 800s. And some people are just big fans of it. I talked to a couple of marathon runners before and they brought it up and I meant to look it up. And then today it's just like, what is that? So it's one of those things that I might actually put the description of that in the show notes, because the way I describe it sounds a bit messy over audio, but it's an interesting one to look up. But there's no scientific proof to it. For me, I'm a fan of this stage doing tempo runs where you're getting X amount of miles or kilometers in, where you're like 15, 20 seconds slower per kilometer than you would for your goal marathon pace, where you're pushing, but you're not quite, you know, that it's not a long recovery afterwards where you feel like a day or two later you can go out and get your easy run in and you work more on your heart rate, and overall mileage over the week maybe is like 10% less with 3 weeks to go, maybe, you know, 20% less with 2 weeks to go, then right down for the last week, like 50% of mileage before that big day, and then you're feeling good and you're going from there. Or even throwing in some strides during the run, it to me makes sense in my head from the way I train.
Yeah, and what you said, and that's I'd love to give that a go, but equally, I don't want to suffer.
Not now. Don't do it now. I can see you taking
you
it.
Never know.
I know what next week's podcast is about. Sean, I tried it. I pulled a hammy. I'm out.
Turns out I'm doing a 4-hour marathon. For me, it'll be. I'm kind of going on relative effort and heart rate. So when I'm on the treadmill for 45 minutes, I'm starting at the 150. I'm trying to put myself in the position that I've already been running for the half marathon and then seeing what I can do at that stage. So like on the Friday nights, well, it hasn't really been Friday night with work commitments and stuff, but I'm doing a 3.5% incline run for X amount of minutes. The reason being, hills are the enemy. And I want to put myself in a situation where mentally I was like, well, look, you've done 35 minutes running up a hill consistently at 6-minute kilometer pace, which is, I'm kind of giving myself, my plan is like, how do you stay consistent? Sorry, I know I'm jumping, but the reason behind this is I said to myself, if I'm going for a 4-hour, I need to give myself a 15-second to 20-second window either side of the target pace. If I'm going up a hill, allow a 5:50, 6 minutes. If I'm going down a hill, maybe consider the 5:20 to 5:25 to try and balance out the day, and it gives the mind something to think of. So on the Friday night, it was like, right, well, we're running up a hill and the pace is this, and the heart rate's climbing and climbing and climbing. And then you get to that point where it's like, we're 10 minutes in and we're in the 170s. Okay, you've got 25 minutes left. And it's just, it's working on them little things that just gives it back to me, because on that run on Sunday, my heart rate was 140. Going down the hills 139, going up the hill went up to 160, but the pace was staying the same. And for me, it was like, well, I've held this heart rate going up a hill for 35 minutes, so the hill's going to stop and I'm going to be able to breathe and I'm going to be able to get the heart rate back down. And cardiovascularly, then I'm telling myself, you're okay for now. It's mechanically, how are you fixed? Do you know, like, and that's kind of I can't really put that structure on what I've been doing in the training, but I've been setting myself up for 30K plus. So what I'm doing Monday to Friday is 30K plus. When the heart rate's up and you're feeling like shit, how are you going to hold on? And I've been doing varied things with varied paces, hills, etc., and then the long run on the weekend. So for the next 10 days, I'm going to be building through the phases. Up until the Sunday, I'll probably try and run the half marathon at the 5:10 pace or a 5:20 pace. I'll try and aim for the average that's less than it, to just try and boost my heart rate up a little bit. And then from Monday, it'll probably be my last above 160 beat per minute heart rate session. And as the week goes on, it'll be nothing above 150, nothing above 140. Probably get on the bike on Thursday, nothing above 120, and then that'll be it to see what happens. And that's my kind of weird approach. It might sound ridiculous, but that's what I'm going to try and do.
It does make sense though, in terms of tapering, in terms of pulling back. You know, maybe it's not a full 3-week tapering, but at the same time, you are pulling back the intensity as you get closer and closer to it, with that last week or so to go. So I mean, you're just squeezing 16 weeks or 12 weeks down into 4 or 5, so that's what it's gonna look like.
Last thing before you go. This is a bit of a sidebar. I don't know if you have anything else planned, but also in my 5-week plan, I did something I've never done.
Oh.
I prepped my nutrition and my equipment for the marathon on my longest run. So it was my first time. I bought a bag. I have a Camelback and I had jellies. And I took a sip every 2.5 kilometers. I took a jelly every 5K. On the 10K, I took a gel just to see how everything was going. And it was going really well. And then when it was done, I was like, right, how much water have I left? Do I need this much? And I have to say, I kind of wish I'd done all this a bit earlier, but I had a bit of a complex. I don't know if anyone else is out there. I bought the bag and I was like, am I really going to show up to the marathon with a bag? What a sap.
Hey, they were big in the 90s, man. Bring it back.
I just felt like, Sean shows up in a fucking saw doctor's teacher holding a 750 at Lucasade. It's like, yeah, let's do a marathon. And then there's me with a bag. I was like, oh, I'm a full kid. Oh, no. But I have to say, it's the first time I've ran a distance hands-free. And it was absolutely brilliant because I just had the Camelback to the mouth. I just had to open and close it. The gels were really easily accessible. They were just sitting on. I brought more water than I actually needed based on what I was doing and how much I drank. And do you know, on the marathon when you're freezing and you're wearing a black bag and stuff, I was like, well, if I bring my really light jacket, my hat and gloves, just before it starts, just pop them into the bag. They roll up small. They're not really a weight. Like, everyone's worried about a weight penalty, but like at 90 kilos, is 300 grams really going to affect me? No. So I was like, I might actually be warm at the start line for the first time of year. I was like, you know what? I'm fucking wearing the bag.
That's what you're doing. my long run was, but you'd be shocked to hear it. It was 6K, and I popped into a spar and grabbed myself a Lucasade, and I kept running. I timed that for 20K, needed another ball, and then I finished with the hills. I suppose what we'll do actually before we get into this, and I want to preface this. So we put up the thing where we had our last run 2 weeks beforehand, and on Strava, a lot of people ran, 2 weeks beforehand was their long run. Before I get to the whole science thing, what the latest research says, whether it's 3 weeks, 2 weeks, or even 4 weeks comes into it for tapering, we got a couple of quick comments and stuff on the Instagram. So I'm going to run through them quick and what other people thought about tapering and what is good and bad. And I probably should have done this before, because I can't find the story on it now. So Eric, I'm going to let you keep talking. I should have got this set up beforehand. I'm like, where do you find, I was like, the story's gone on it. Where do you find stories and stuff on this? I was kind of hoping you talked about something. Archive.
Well, I did talk about a bag, which was your perfect opportunity to start looking up this stuff. But,
really, I was interested in what you had to say.
I have to say, Decathlon is amazing. A lot of people are out buying gels, and I know some are very flavoursome. I know Connecticut. I can't remember what's on the back of them, so I won't comment on them. But they're very tasty. But I have noticed through the cycle, which was a lot of time eating on a bike, and through this, everything comes down to how many grams is in the sachet, and what you should be taking in per hour. So, through what I have mixed up on my back, I'm getting in a good bit of sugar and a good bit of salts and stuff, magnesiums, everything else that's in the pouch in the back. And that's kind of the decision that I wanted to bring. I don't want to find myself cramping again too early. So I'm sweating a lot. There's a lot of salt in it, so I need to replenish that. But I find in the Decathlon, the sachets of gels are carrying a very large amount of grams. So you only need one per hour, really, if you're taking on. Yeah, so I think it's about 35 grams of carbs, and then I'm eating a jelly as well, which is another 30, so there's 60, and then I'm getting some in through my drink as well. So carbs wise, getting in a decent amount, and sugars, caffeine, and salts. Like, so there's a decent amount coming in for, and easily digestible. Stomach wise, I didn't feel any major woes or worries, because I wasn't horsing 7, 8, 9, 10 gels into me. I had 2 gels through 30k and 2 jellies and a good supplement drink. But that's just me. Maybe I'm efficient at burning fat for energy and stuff, but it would just be kind of my advice for people who are going last minute buying gels. Have a read of what's on the back. See what you're getting. You know, if a gel's asking to have a gel every 20 minutes, you don't want to be carrying 9, 10, 12 gels. You want to have one that it's kind of like you're after drinking Ribena raw. You're kind of like, ooh, and then you just wash it down with a bit of water. But you kind of want to just focus on it, get it in, wash it down, and then it's done. You don't want to be thinking, oh, another gel, you know, like, so it is something to think about for people, but it's one thing I discovered.
If you have a gel that has 35, 40 grams of carbs in it, you're saying one of them every hour is sufficient, regardless of time, pace, intensity, that it should be, it averages out the same for each person over time or something else?
Well, we're talking about a person who has been training for their marathon, that, right, you know, your heart rate's going to be between the 140 and 160. You should be, because you've been training. And even for me, it is in that stage that, you know, you're burning, we'll say 1,000. It's not really 1,000. Everyone says 1,000 an hour for the running. It should be, but it depends on your weight. So there's a lot of factors. But that, with some sort of isotonic, with something that you can chew on as well. So like I'm up to around the 60 grams of carbs as well. Now they say you should be taking in, you know, your extra proteins, your stuff, but unless you're gonna have the Snickers or granola, I can't eat something that's gonna catch my breath. So the only thing I can do is jellies and gels. But that's a me thing. Whereas I know people who will eat granola when they're running, and I would be choking on it for 10k. I'd swallow it, I'd breathe it in or something, you know. So
not that pace.
It's just for people to consider. You don't want to carry too much. I know I'm talking about carrying a jacket, hat and gloves, but have a look at the gels, have a look at the quantities, have a look at what you're getting, and see what effect that's going to have on your body. Like if you're like, I'd have a Coke Zero and stuff, so I'm used to taking in the 20 to 30 milligrams of caffeine. So a gel is there. You know, if you're taking in a Red Bull, and you know, like, well, what effects are gonna, and I'm not saying people are gonna drink Red Bull. I'm just saying, just find out what's gonna work for you, what's gonna help you out. Like for me, I'll probably carry a packet of jellies, not for the extra calories or this, that, or the other, just for something nice and chewy that gets the saliva going and distracts you for a little while. And that's the only reason I'll carry them. But yeah, I seen people spending a lot of money on gels, on high performance, this, that, and the other, and it's just a panic buy, especially when you go to expos and everyone's like, oh, you need this to survive the wall. It's like, do you? Just have a look at what's your requirements. And there is a lot of free resources online where you can put in your weight, height, whatever, and your expected intake per gram of proteins, carbohydrates, fats per hour. You're going to rely on the fat that you have in your body in the marathon. Protein, unless you're going to have a chicken fillet, my chicken sandwich in the drive-thru on the way around, you know, you're only going to get in so much unless you have a shake with you. So you kind of just want to keep looking at how many carbs you get, the grams of carbs per hour you're going to take in.
But before I get into your comments and stuff, you were saying I have one jelly. Like, are we talking about a Coca-Cola bottle, or are we talking about a wine gum, or a Jelly Baby, or what kind of jelly? Is that a silly question, or are you talking about like a specific sports jellies?
Again, no, this is Decathlon's jellies. They're
regular jellies,
they're
something else in them.
Easy open packet, and they're Kit Kat size, maybe less, but it's just jelly. And it's just like a fruity, sugary jelly. It's small in size, like it's like a Kit Kat. It's nearly too big to describe the size of it. If you get me, it's going Kinder.
Bueno.
What you call those?
Kinder
Minis.
Cake.
Yeah, the little mini Kinder ones, not the Buenos now, but the little ones, the maxi ones, or whatever they're called. Anyway,
that was a sweet tooth you had. We were talking about squishies and everything all day. Now we went down that route.
But anyway, there's them. And like one bite, you're halfway through. The second bite, it's gone, and it's more than enough with a gel. For me, again, some people might like to horse 10 gels into them and shite themselves halfway around, but that's their business.
And that is something on next week's podcast where I talk about it, and on carb loading as well a lot more, because even one of the comments here was just to reduce the mileage. Anthony typed in reduce the mileage by 34%, up the intensity of half those runs, which I totally agree with as well. Work on nutrition and carb loading. So next week on the podcast, you'll be talking in more detail about carb loading, because some people do think it's just a big bowl of pasta right before the race and you have all your carbs into and you're good to go. But as you'll talk about next week, no pun intended, it's more complex than that. I like that one off the spot. Owen talked to you about the last long run last weekend, which is great. Kildare Sports Massage, Brendan Dowd, who's done phenomenal stuff this year. His 32K was today, and then a 2-week taper with short intervals to keep sharp. And that's what we talked about earlier. Just because you're tapering back doesn't mean you can't get those short intervals in or the strides in at the end of your runs and stuff like that. It doesn't mean that the intensity has to come right back, because you already are bringing back the mileage. It is okay to do a small bit like that. Marky put in, he was on the podcast a couple weeks ago, to have a fill of beer before it, which I totally agree with that. So why not, Marky? Knock yourself out. I can't find the exact comment because I think it was on a different story. But I remember Simon was talking about, who's been on the podcast before, just the fear of injuries or something like a niggle being worse than it is when you get to that tapering phase, and then not having to test it and think about it as well. And we had another DM as well. I won't get through all of them now, but just one more. Because Alan talked about it, where he said 3 weeks before he felt it was just mentally too difficult. That's nearly a month, and he does very little the week of, and he feels like we're fine. Whereas he thinks 2 weeks before it'd be a little bit better. But to end the podcast, the big bombshell on scientifically, which is not necessarily what I agree with, but it's hard to argue against science. There was a study done by the Frontiers in Sports Active Living. They measured 158,000 runners through Strava. And they reckon that through tapering, you could knock off up to 5-6 minutes off your time, depending on the weeks. But they said a strict 3-week tapering was probably the best, with a 4-week being pretty bad because you feel very sluggish. And then from 2 weeks, less and less and less, not feeling as good. So they recommend a more disciplined taper strategy from 3 weeks. So that was knocking off, I think it went from 90% of mileage in the week 3 weeks beforehand, then 70, 75, 2 weeks beforehand, roughly 50%, and then going on from there. But what we've talked about the podcast, there's a mentally comes into it. Some people, according to that study, 31% of runners don't even taper at all. 31% stick to it. 64% adopt 2 to 3 weeks tapering. And then I can't remember the exact number. There was a large number of people that don't taper at all before marathons, but they reckon that by tapering 2 to 3 weeks, we'll say, could knock off up to 6 minutes off your marathon time. So I think there's a lot of mental approach to it as well as physical. If you haven't got that long run in, you really need to get it. But then find out what works for you. So if you do a long run and you feel you need a long time to recover from it, then you need to pull back a bit. Where if you feel like you start running again 2-3 days later, then you might be able to push it a little bit more. But it is dependent on how you recover from your runs.
Yeah, and like today, I actually felt like I could run, but I just chose not to. And it was kind of like, it got to this evening, and I was like, I'll go for my run. I was like, oh no, it's rest day. Because I was in work all day. I didn't, I kind of just forgot it was Sunday and I was taking it off, like it was, it's mad. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks, but yeah, we'll have a few kind of final tips and tricks next weekend, carb loading, a few other myths, and we'll bust, and we'll talk about a few other things, but yeah, to wrap up that thing, I was just looking at some of my own notes there for myself, but they reckon anywhere between 30 and 60 grams of carbs per hour. 150 to 250 calories an hour is what you should try and take in through sports drinks. And they're all going to be sugars. Like, let's be honest, they're the easiest to package small. So yeah, it's just on that one, and the rest is mental from there, and hopefully your innards are happy with what you've taken on board. So even on your short runs, if you're only going out for an hour, just try a gel, see how it goes with you, and practice your food the night before. Like we said, it's not just the pasta, but if you're having pasta, make sure it's the same one you've tried, and you know that it comes out on schedule the next morning as well. So and it's laughable, but it's all very, very important.
100%. And next week it's getting real, Eric, because Easy next week's will be the last podcast we do before doing the Dublin Marathon. So it's getting real. It's getting pretty close. And next week's podcast, we're going to talk more about carb loading and more about looking back on our top tips we've done in the podcast before for leading up to Dublin Marathon, and see if anything's changed, because I find over the years you evolve with different races, you learn something new. So there might be something we talked about before in the podcast that we're like, kind of live that's a bunch of BS. I'd rather take this approach to it now. But with that said, Eric, anything else to add to this week's episode of the podcast?
Oh, that's me.
That's me too. So that's it for myself and Eric. Both of us till next week. Take care.
Bye.